Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Red Storm Baltic Approaches, the Air War over the Baltic, 1987. This is an expansion for Red Storm, a game designed by Douglas Bush and published by GMT Games. Well, I have the original Red Storm, and when they announced they were coming out with Baltic Approaches, I knew I had to get it because it has Navy and Marine Corps aircraft, so you know I'm definitely going to be in on that. The original Red Storm, I kind of dabbled with it very, very briefly. Not enough to even scratch the surface. This is the type of game you have to sit down and dig into and commit time to because there's a lot to absorb in it. But you know what? When we get to do that is up to us. Even though I don't plan on doing it right now, I still wanted to get a hold of this expansion. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this expansion is all about. Red Storm Baltic Approaches is the first expansion for GMT's Red Storm game of operational level air combat between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Red Storm Baltic Approaches adds the air forces of Denmark, Sweden, and Poland, along with additional units for nations represented in Red Storm, including U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps aircraft. The game adds naval units, anti-ship missiles, maritime weather, and special rules for air combat over the Western Baltic. Mission types found in Red Storm, close air support, interdiction, air defense suppression, and deep strike, are now joined by new types, focused on raids against enemy ships, amphibious operation support, airborne drops, and aerial mining. Solo scenarios using the bot system introduced in Red Storm are also included. New aircraft types including the F-14A Tomcat, AV-8B Harrier II, FA-18A Hornet, A-6E Intruder, EA-6B Prowler, Atlantic II, P-3C Orion, F-35XD Draken, JA-37 AJ-37 Viggen, Tu-22M Backfire SU-20 Fitter, Tu-95 Bear, IL-38 May, and more. Naval units range from cruisers and destroyers down through amphibious ships, missile patrol craft, and other types from the various countries whose navies would be engaged in the area. You can see an example of the map up here in the counters. Game contents, we had 2 maps, 1 rulebook, 1 scenario book, 1 appendices booklet, 1 counter sheet, 1 player aid, a USSR Poland aircraft chart, a NATO Sweden aircraft chart, U.S. Navy Marine Corps aircraft chart, a Warsaw Pact naval chart, NATO naval chart, a pad of naval unit log sheets, and 2 10-sided dice. It is rated 8 on the complexity scale of 1 to 9, and the solitaire suitability is at 6. It is for ages 14 and up, 1 to 2 players, and plays in 1 to 6 hours. So let's take a look inside and see what we get. All right, we get our rules, short rule book, appendices, and a big thick scenario book, a whole bunch of player aids, sheet of counters, our maps, and our pad of log sheets, some baggies, and a pair of D10s. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the expansion. And here's a look at the 2 maps that come with the expansion. You're just going to lay one on top of the other, line them up, put some plexi down, and you should be good to go. Just be careful when you open them up. Don't tear them like I did. Unfortunately, I tore my paper map, so I got to be real careful about that going forward. It doesn't get any worse. But just be careful of that when you're opening them up. Top left, we have the turn track, phase track, the detect track, and then the map key at the top left. Area of operations from Denmark down through West Germany over to East Germany on the right, and the bottom part of Sweden at the top right of the map. The areas that are pink are your big city areas. That's your heavy congestion of population and buildings, things like that. So it's easily seen on the map. It just pops real easy. Then you have all these blue circles. These are your airfields. They're going to have different numbers. That's going to be the rating of the airfield, meaning the airfield length, the runway length. That tells you how many flights you can handle for each turn. We also have ports now. And next to the ports and next to the airfields, you're going to have little symbols that are going to tell you what the level of any aircraft support you have in that area, whether it's light or medium. But it follows the same style map that we saw in the Red Storm base game. So if you're already familiar with that, this can be very simple to follow along with. And once you get over that first pink thing that jumps out at you, which is the first thing I noticed when I first got the initial game, Red Storm. I was like, wow, why is there so much pink? Makes sense. It makes it easy to read and know where the heavy city areas are. And it just carries over to the expansion, and it works real well. Next, we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game. This is a fold out, but I'm just going to open it up so we can see both the top and bottom, being that they're facing the same way at the same time. At the top, we have the USSR aircraft data chart, giving us different aircraft that are in this expansion, the air-to-surface missile table, surface search radar, and the aircraft notes. At the bottom, we have the same for the Polish aircraft data. And on the inside, we have the Warsaw Pact naval data chart, giving us all the naval vessels that are in the game for the Warsaw Pact, along with the SSM missile table, the naval unit notes, and the sub-target damage table. And likewise for NATO, we have the NATO aircraft data chart and the Swedish aircraft data chart. On the inside, we have the NATO naval data chart. Then we have the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps aircraft data chart. And on the inside, we have a breakdown of the different types of aircraft in the expansion, giving us both a little blurb and a graphic example of the different aircraft types, as well as naval, helicopter, and missiles. And for the final player aid, which is a fold-out, we start off with the air detection table. This is updated in this expansion. The naval detection table, naval unit line of sight, naval unit identification, ASMs and track phase, arms versus naval units, CBU capability, and ground unit organic AAA table. And on the inside, we have the air-to-surface attack table, ASM, SSM target table, naval electronic warfare attack table, SAM data table, bailouts, simple CSAR at sea, Baltic approaches recovery, naval unit damage table, air-to-surface, surface-to-surface missile summary, and the weather table along the bottom. And on the back, we close out with the scenario random events, the naval AAA table, and the naval AAA damage table. Then we have the pad of naval log sheets where you're going to keep all the information for each of your task forces. And we'll take a look at the counter sheet that comes with the game. These are half-inch counters. We have a mix of aircraft and naval vessels, as well as administrative counters for use in the game. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 9-page full-color rulebook. We have the table of contents on the front listing out all the rules and their associated page numbers. Again, this is just the expansion, so you're going to have the base game Red Storm to use those rules, and in conjunction with these rules for the expansion. Start off with our introduction, breakdown of the glossary of terms, game equipment explaining to you all your maps, your counters, how those all break down. Then you have your movement, raid, task planning, detection, anti-aircraft artillery, SAMs and radars, air-to-ground ordnance, air-to-ground attacks, electronic countermeasures, fuel and recovery, weather, night, recon missions, CSAR, the front. Then we have scenario conditions, scenario setup, and then naval units, as well as your victory points and your victory conditions for each of the scenarios. Then a breakdown of your task forces, your naval unit radar, unit detection attempts, naval unit AAA, naval unit SAMs, detection and identification of naval units as targets, naval unit damage, naval units and arm attacks, naval unit electronic warfare, and then surface-to-surface missiles, SSM types, launches, data relays, and then we have the rules index at the back of the expansion rules. And we'll take a look at the appendices book. This is a 19-page full-color book. On the front, we have the table of contents listing out all the different sections and their associated page numbers. We have the order of battle, airfields, ground unit locations, example play designer's notes, and then the select bibliography at the end. Start off with the NATO order of battle on the first couple pages. Then we have the Warsaw Pact order of battle. The airfields, listing out all the different airfields on the map and the hex locations, so it's easier for you to find. It'll just tell you where to look. Ground unit locations. Then we have the example of play here starting on page 10. Illustrated, and give you a breakdown of full turns and all the steps taken so you can follow along and learn. Then we have the designer's notes on page 16. Doug's going to explain why he went to the Baltic. Then we have the bibliography at the end. And we are done with the appendices. And lastly, we'll take a look at the scenario book. This is a 46-page full-color book. On the front, we have the table of contents listing out all the different scenarios and their page numbers, so that way you can easily reference them. You notice at the bottom right, it says solo scenario E, F, G, and H. So there's more solitaire scenarios included in the expansion. Start off with BA1, target practice. It's going to give you the NATO order of battle. BA2, scrambled takeoff. You have your NATO and Warsaw Pact order of battle, your scenario conditions, the special rules, and then your victory conditions. BA3, clean sweep. Then we have BA4, knife fight. Pact attack. Choke point. Very low and very fast. Waterways, Baltic flag. And as you see, I'm not going to go through each of the scenarios in detail. You can just pause the screen if you wanted to look at any of the details yourself. Winged infantry, because there's a lot to cover here. Nothing's going to stop us. Flying artillery, own the night. Hold the line, supply lines. Chasing dragons. Escalation. Death from above, Baltic thunder. On station. Enemy coast ahead. It sounds kind of familiar. Paras, danger zone. That sounds awful familiar. Top gun. MAGTAF. Two suns. Then we get the BAC-1, setting conditions. From the sea. Then we have these solitaire scenarios. The hunt for K-79, takedown, clearing the way, and lastly, danger close. And that will close out the scenario book. And that is a look at everything you get inside of Red Storm, Baltic Approaches. This is an expansion for Red Storm, a game designed by Douglas Bush and published by GMT Games. Well, if you were looking for an air simulation game in a hypothetical World War III situation, this is the game for you. It's an evolution of the downtown system, and it is just a really, really in-depth and deep game that you can really just dive into. And you'll need to dive into it. You need to have time to sit down and dive into it and just enjoy it. There was a fan-created expansion also that will help you with that. Dark Blue Defection, I've covered that on the channel, and that is really well done. And that does help you in kind of easing the steps in learning, because this is a game that will take some time to digest fully. If you've got someone who can teach you, that's even better. But if you're going to be learning it yourself, you're going to need to learn in steps. So that's where Dark Blue Defection is really fantastic. Then you can just play the full game. Then you can play also Baltic Approaches. But had to get Baltic Approaches, has Marine Corps aircraft now, have the Marines, I got to have it. I'm not really an air guy. I'm more of a ground guy, but I love the idea of planning your missions and then carrying them out. So I definitely had to check this out. And then, of course, it's set hypothetical World War III. Hypothetical World War III, modern stuff is right up my alley. I'm always going to be interested in that and couldn't pass this up. So glad I added this to the library of Red Storm. So I've got Red Storm, I've got Dark Blue Defection, and now Baltic Approaches. So when I finally get the time to sit down and do a deep dive into this game, I'm going to have a lot of stuff to go through. And I'm really looking forward to when I can do that. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you'd be curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.